assault. I do want to go ahead and show you this tweet from our friend to the show, Meghann Cuniff. We do know that today it's nearing the end, but just a few minutes before 4 p.m. local time there in Los Angeles County on Valentine's Day, no less, the jury in the ASAP Rocky gun case assault trial is incredibly close to deliberating. Lewin's rebuttal was finished. Just a few more instructions, but those deliberations are going to have to wait until next week, Tuesday in particular, at 9:30 a.m. because of the President's Day holiday. To talk just a bit more about what happened today in the courtroom, bringing in Meghann Cuniff now. Meghann, thanks for joining us. You were in court today. Talk about how the end of this case is now heading. Again, we know we've heard from the defense lawyers, we've heard from the prosecutors. Now the jury instructions are next. What's going to be happening here in the next few minutes when they return to court?
Yeah, today was really the final argument day. This was Joe Tacopina, who's ASAP Rocky's lawyer. He finished his closing argument this morning. It was a long one. He went 2 hours yesterday and then more than 2 hours this morning. And then it was the DA's chance to give the rebuttal argument. And he even warned jurors in the beginning that he was not probably going to be brief. And he wasn't. So it was a long day in court, got out about 4 p.m. It's unclear if the jury actually started deliberating. I don't think they did because there's paperwork that they need to get. And I even heard the judge say he wanted the attorneys to look over the verdict forms before he sent it up to the jury room. So Tuesday at 9:30 a.m., they are all due back. And I think that's when deliberations will really begin. And it could be a long day. We could have a verdict that day. We could not. There's a lot that remains to be seen, but they definitely put it all out there today. And the jury has the case now.
Speaking of putting it all out there, it was all over social media when it happened. There were fireworks that erupted there in the courtroom between the prosecutor, of course, the judge, and the defense attorney, Joe Tacopina, all arguing about this case. Explain why there was such contention there between the three of them, I should say, with the judge even shouting at moments from behind the bench.
Yeah, the prosecutor, John Lewin, has taken repeated issues with some of the things that Joe Tacopina has said in his closing argument, some of the arguments that he's made, and just the approach that he's taken. And of course, John Lewin has been a prosecutor in L.A. for a number of years. He's a licensed California lawyer. Joe Tacopina is from New York City and came over here from out of state to do the trial. So Lewin has made the point that he either doesn't know California law or he doesn't care. But he was taking issue with some disparaging remarks that Tacopina had made toward counsel. He's allowed to go after witnesses all he wants. He can. Lewin even said he can misstate the evidence if he wants, but he was talking about perjury by witnesses, the main witness, Terrell Efron, and there are California rules of conduct and different things regarding what attorneys can say about each other. They're not supposed to say disparaging remarks about each other, say that attorneys somehow suborn perjury, embrace perjury, anything like that. The judge made it clear yesterday there should be no comments about involving counsel in perjury. Witnesses in perjury is fair game. So there were some comments this morning that really drew the ire of John Lewin, and he got very fired up. And he and the judge have known each other for 30 years, and it really shows in how they interact sometimes. And the judge immediately yelled at him to stop yelling, and they went back and forth. And Lewin's point was that what's going to be done about this? That he's saying this is repeated misconduct by prosecutors in their, or excuse me, he's the prosecutor, by defense in their closing argument. And then Joe Tacopina took an issue with just being accused of this kind of misconduct, that he didn't think it was fair, brought up some issues with John Lewin, them trying to stipulate to the location of a shooting range not being in Los Angeles, when actually it did turn out to be in Los Angeles. He even brought up, Joe Tacopina yelled about a recent Ninth Circuit opinion that he said John Lewin lied in a case that was overturned. And it was just a back and forth. But John Lewin did say that he was going to one more step from Joe Tacopina, he would air out all the unethical things he thinks Joe is doing in this case, Joe Tacopina, and it said that your time is coming. They really kind of got into it. And Joe was kind of mocking him like, oh, I'm so threatened. And John Lewin said, you should feel threatened, Joe. Your time is coming. And the sheriff's deputy was ushering us all out of the courtroom then. But later that afternoon, when his rebuttal argument came up, Nathan Hochman, who's the new district attorney in Los Angeles and knows John Lewin well, was in the courtroom to watch that. And he's obviously closely involved in the case. So I think there might be some more things to come in the aftermath of this. But right now, of course, everyone's just waiting for the verdict.
As you said, everyone's waiting for the verdict. It was a bit shocking to watch the clip online to see how spicy things can get there in the courtroom, but it's an emotional case. It's one where one side feels very strongly. The other, again, is fighting for their ideas as well. So, again, when we're talking about what's happening in the courtroom and people taking issues with things, we also saw this. You tweeted it out as well. This happened there. The judge saying, do not mention Rihanna being in the courtroom or the babies being in the courtroom. This was Judge Arnold. This is what he told the Deputy DA, John Lewin. He referenced Lewin's earlier comments, said that they were fine, but no more mentions of her. Why is it so important that Rihanna is not mentioned in the case? She's been in the courtroom, there in the audience the entire week, even bringing, again, the two babies, Riza and Riot, by her side yesterday. But again, no more mention. Why is that important?
I think the judge has some concerns about preserving the family's right to go to court to support a defendant. And I think there's just kind of a fine line here between John Lewin wanting to draw attention to the fact that jurors really are not legally allowed to consider Rihanna and the babies when deciding whether to convict Rocky. And he was pointing out that Joe Tacopina has explicitly referenced Rihanna to try to drum up sympathy. And he's warning the jurors that if they did try to consider that, it would be considered juror misconduct. So that's why Judge Arnold said that he thought those comments were fine, but no more comments about Rihanna being in the courtroom from here on out. And I think it's just kind of a fine line that we're skirting between addressing the celebrity in the room, the literal celebrity in the room, and then obviously preserving the right of that celebrity to be in court and support her family.
And that's been a huge point. Of course, this case has gotten additional attention simply because A$AP Rocky does have a family with Rihanna. So I can see why the judge is making that. I also remember from those, when they were picking out the jury members, they even asked the question, are you going to be affected if Rihanna will this sway your decision at all if she's in the courtroom, if her name is mentioned? So it is important to know that that's been a consistent theme throughout this case as well. But another thing that was brought up in court today, I want to put up another post that you had. Let's talk about the tapes, Meghann. This is there from the prosecutor's mouth. The tapes are some of the best evidence that we have in this case. This is the DA Lewin saying that they gave about those secret recordings of A$AP Rocky's alleged shooting victim that the defense gave to the prosecutors. Talk about this. They believe that this is some of the best evidence that they have. Why is that?
Yes, well, and the defense might say that it's some of their best evidence too, because they're the ones who brought up these tapes and put it on. And one, they think what Relly is saying on the tapes supports their idea that he was trying to extort Rocky, and he doesn't care about the criminal case, that he was lying about the shooting just to try to get money out of him. But also, when they initially played the tapes for Relly in court, they played a snippet of the call, and Relly said that he didn't recognize the voice. He said those are fake, possibly made by AI or something. So the point of bringing in this witness who was recording him, Wally, A$AP Rocky's friend, was to show that actually this really is Relly, and to try to discredit him and show the jury that he had denied that this voice was his when it really is his. And that's part of the overall defense, to discredit Relly. But I think we focus so much sometimes on the little things, the details in trials, but we forget what the big picture is, because the defense needs to discredit Relly. But the reason they need to discredit Relly is because they want to show that he's lying about the shooting. And it turns out that these recordings that include him talking about money, talking about how if he got some kind of payment, the district attorney would never be able to find him because he would be on an island somewhere. These recordings are also him. He does not know he's being recorded, and he talks about the shooting pretty detailedly. He tells Wally everything that happened, and he really gets into candid detail about what he wants from Rocky. He says some quotes about Rocky that I really don't think a defense attorney would want in front of the jury. Stuff about how, Rocky's been on his high horse for a very long time, and just makes the case that this shooting happened. He had shots fired at him. This was a setup, and he wants his due. And the important thing about this, the way he tells the story, is it matches everything else he said. And these were played in court after a few days of testimony from him, where I think all sides would agree he was not the greatest prosecution witness at all. And what these tapes ended up doing, the recordings did, the prosecutors ended up playing way more of these recordings in their case than the defense did, because it's Relly candidly talking in his own words, not in a courtroom setting. There's no interruptions from attorneys. He doesn't even know he's being recorded. And he's corroborating everything that prosecutors are saying happened in this shooting. So it's really a question for me of how the defense thought it was a good idea to put these tapes forward and only play a few choice spots, because the way the trial rules work, they gave the tapes to prosecutors to say, hey, we're bringing in this witness. We're going to play these tapes. You get this stuff to look at it too and prepare your cross. And the prosecutors must have just looked at it and said, wow, here's our case right here. I mean, they were saying it in their rebuttal. This stuff is totally incriminating. So it's really just a matter of perception. And, sometimes attorneys think things are going to be helpful for their client, and they end up being a lot more harmful than helpful.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because ultimately it does come down to the jury and what their perception is in this case. In fact, I even want to put this back up, another post from you talking about the fact that there was no verdict today, but in those closing arguments from the prosecutors, if the gun is legit, you can't acquit. That's kind of the sentiment, of course, a call back to the famous case that happened there with O.J. Simpson. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. If the gun is legit, you can't acquit. In the situation, juries are about to get instructions. They're going to go into deliberations starting on Tuesday. When do you think we'll have a verdict?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a verdict on Tuesday. A question of how fast it's going to be, but unless if there's a holdout, if there's a hung jury, I don't think it would be declared a mistrial that day. It seems like the judges would give them what's called an Allen charge, tell them to keep deliberating. But I would expect a verdict on Tuesday, but it's always so impossible to predict one way or the other how much time. But I think if they start deliberating 9:30 and they've got everything, we could definitely have a verdict by the afternoon.
And it's certainly something that we're going to be watching for here on Live Now. Again, we got to play out some of those moments in court. It really is captivating as well. Got to be entertaining for you to be in the room as well. But Meghann, other things that happened this week that are also important today, just a few hours ago, I've talked to you about this in the past. We got to talk about the Jay-Z of it all. Putting this up from you as well. Attorney Tony Buzbee, the famed Texas lawyer, has now dropped the rape lawsuit against Jay-Z. We do know this now. This was a case that we talked about. Why do you think that this was dropped? And we know it was dropped with prejudice, saying it can't be brought again as well.
I think this is a result of everything we've seen over the last few months, with all the back and forth, all the filings, and really the work that Jay-Z's legal team has done to try to show that this lawsuit has no merit. And it's important to keep in mind that there was a dismissal motion pending that the judge had not ruled on. There had also been a sanctions motion filed, but that had actually been withdrawn. So there was, some kind of question about whether there was something going on behind the scenes. But I think it's telling that Jay-Z and his lawyer Alex Spiro have issued statements about this, but we have not heard from Tony Buzbee. Unless I've missed it, I have not seen a public statement from him. I've actually reached out for comment on this and haven't heard. So they're pretty explicit in their statement that not one red penny was paid here. So that indicates there's no settlement. And with this being dismissed with prejudice, there's no way it can be refiled. So, as I said, we've just seen so much over the last few months that I think this is the end result of that.
And it is interesting. Also have that statement up there, as you just referred to, Jay-Z saying this fictional tale that they created was laughable. If not for the seriousness of the claims, I would not wish this experience on anyone. The trauma that my wife, my children, my loved ones, and I have endured can never be dismissed. I think that puts a nice button on how he feels about this case and it ultimately being dismissed. But again, Meghann Cuniff, legal affairs journalist, here to help us break down the latest headlines as it pertains to some of these big cases involving celebrities. We appreciate you. Might have to talk on Tuesday if there's a verdict coming in.
Yes, I'll look forward to it.
All right, thanks so much, Meghann. And we do have to take this time to step away for our final 2-minute break of the hour. Stay right here with us.